Hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome to My EdTech Life. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful Wednesday, and hopefully, anywhere you may be at this time, you had a beautiful day. It was wonderful. And again, if you're joining us and watching us live, thank you again for all your support and joining us today on episode 53. And today, I'm very excited because our guest today is Dr. Rene Corbeil from the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. And I just wanted to add that Dr. Corbeil was the very first guest on episode 1 for My EdTech Life. And now he is back. And I'm just really excited for what you're going to share. And again, thank you so much for coming back and joining us. Dr. Corbeil, how are you today?
I'm great, thank you. And I'm very humbled to be invited back. I mean, now you're a rock star. So
Oh, Dr. Corbeil.
I'm happy to be here.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Corbeil. So, for our viewers and everybody that's watching and people that are listening or will be listening to the podcast later, Dr. Corbeil, just please let us know a little bit about what your position you currently hold, and maybe the area of expertise, and maybe some of your favorite things to work on.
Okay, thank you. Um, my name is Rene Corbeil, and I am the program coordinator for the Master of Education in Educational Technology, as well as the faculty lead for the doctoral program. It's a doctoral specialization in educational technology at UTRGV. My research interests involve anything having to do with distance education, e-learning, mobile learning, or remote learning nowadays. So it's funny because it's stuff that I enjoy researching. So part of what I do in my job, has become part of my hobby. I have several social platforms where I curate all kinds of ed tech related news and information and stories. So my hobbies and pastimes have mixed with my job, and I feel like I'm very, very fortunate to be able to do something that I love in a subject that I love.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I agree with you. Isn't it awesome when, like you said, your work ties into some of the favorite things that you do that end up being your hobbies? And I think that that's what makes it even better because of just that connection to what you are already doing. So awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, for our viewers that are joining us, thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, today's topic is the digital age is here. Are you prepared? And we're going to be talking about a specific area of micro learning, which is something that maybe you've heard that word a lot. It's been out there. So let's go ahead and just get started with that. So, Dr. Corbeil, I know we've been hearing a lot about micro learning lately. Is this something that is a new phenomenon, or is this something that maybe was already there and now it's just kind of been put in the spotlight now due to our current situation?
That is a good question. The topic of microlearning, it has been getting a lot of buzz lately. I mean, if you look at the trades and magazines and journals, they're talking a lot about it, but it's actually been around for a long time. A guy by the name of Theo Hug in 2002 coined the term microlearning in his book, The Didactics of Microlearning. But if you think about it, the concept of breaking learning down into small, digestible, manageable chunks of information, that's been around for forever. It may not have had the name microlearning, but it's been around. I think that the recent proliferation of smartphones and tablets, combined with the explosive growth of social media over the past decade, has brought the concept of personalized mobile learning through bite-sized learning nuggets or snippets to the forefront. And if you look at some of the biggest innovations of the last 10, 15 years, the iPhone starting to get a little old at 15 years old. But if you think about it, that's pretty much when everything started. Because since then, 5 years later, the iPad, it's growing venerable at 11 years old. But social media, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Khan Academy, all of those things came into being when these tools came into existence. And that's, I think, what has accelerated it and made it and brought personalized learning through small nuggets into the forefront today.
Yeah. And so one of the things that you said and that you mentioned is, mobile devices and just the accessibility that one has. Now, one of the things that one of my favorite areas of study too has been, of course, PLNs, Twitter, social media, and I like to call them professional learning families. But one thing that I love is the fact that anytime I may need to either find something out or I find a resource, I get on my phone and I can just pretty much go on Twitter and I can find a little nugget, like you said, just a bite sized chunk of information that I can use, I can store, I can digest, and then I can process and share. And I think that, with the advent of mobile devices, it just seems so like that change was wow, like all of a sudden now anybody can learn pretty much anywhere as long as you have access. So that I think is really, really cool.
And if you think about the power of the computer that's in your hand, I mean, it's more powerful than all of the NASA computers when we went to the moon. So I mean, if someone from the 50s were to, come into the future and see the technology that we have, it'd be like, wow. I think they wouldn't be able to imagine the things that we can currently do. And now with our watches that can monitor our safety and health and connect with everything. I mean, we are ultra connected. Your areas of interest are augmented reality and virtual reality, and I have a feeling that in the very near future we're going to be seeing some devices coming out that are a little bit more affordable that everybody can have, that will allow us to even connect to the world even more as a result of of these devices. I keep waiting or holding out for the Apple glasses or whatever they're going to call them, because I have a feeling that they're going to be really they're going big on augmented reality.
Yeah. And then that's something that, like you said, learning is definitely, changing and the way that the learning is delivered. But of course, that's something that's very important. Like we're talking about micro learning, just little bite sized nuggets and chunks. So I know that you have also recently written a book. So let me go ahead and share this right here. Dr. Corbeil, tell us a little bit about this.
Well, the book is titled Microlearning in the Digital Age, the Design and Delivery of Learning in Snippets. And it's actually an edited book by myself, by Dr. Badrul Khan, and Dr. Rene Corbeil. We came upon the idea of the book. It's in our program, first of all, in the Masters of EdTech. We're continually updating our courses and our topics and projects to reflect the emerging trends in the field. And since microlearning has been discussed a lot lately in trade journals and in EdTech circles over the past few years, we decided that we needed to take a closer look at it. But when we started the book project about almost 2 years ago, we were surprised that there really weren't a lot of resources out there. There weren't any textbooks on it. So one of the courses that we redesigned the project so that the students would be developing a microlearning object. And when we pitched the idea to our publisher, Routledge, they were actually very enthusiastic about the topic, because they too, at around the same time, were exploring how they could leverage microlearning in their organization to help improve employee knowledge and skills to enhance productivity. So, it just was at the perfect time. They were interested. We had the idea, and we pitched it to them. They loved the idea, and here we are. Almost 2 years later, the book is finally getting ready. It's been submitted to the publisher for printing, and I think it'll be ready to ship by April or May.
Excellent. So, Dr. Corbeil, tell us a little bit more. I know you kind of told us pretty much micro learning in the digital age, but what inspired it? I know that it's been a something that is 2 years in the making. So, I mean, it doesn't mean that it just started 2 years ago. I'm pretty sure that the inspiration grew as you started seeing the education landscape change, K through 12, higher ed. What were some of the thought process of getting together and putting this book together?
Well, we've always been looking at the topics, and this is one topic that I've been seeing a lot in the media. A lot. It's been discussed a lot. When I go to conferences, I'll see several presentations on it, and people are talking about it. But basically, we didn't really know a lot about what. I mean, we think about the term microlearning, and oftentimes all we think is, oh, it's just cutting up a regular sized lesson into little chunks, and that's microlearning. But we were more interested in finding out, well, first of all, is this a viable instructional strategy? How valid is it as a pedagogy? Is it something that is just a gimmicky type of thing that we're seeing a lot in the trades? A lot of professional development, performance development type of programs, or is it something that's actually viable? So for us, when we started to write the book, we had a bunch of questions, and a lot of the questions that we're talking about today is, were the questions that we tried to answer when we put the book together. And what we did is we reached out to authors and professionals in both education and the talent development industries to try to see if we can get an answer to those questions. That's why when we reached out to Theo Hug, who is the guy who coined the term, we asked him if he would be gracious enough to contribute a chapter to the book, and he said, of course, I would be very happy to. I thought, like, wow, that's a big fish, because now with him we could attract other big fish to contribute to the book, and it just took off from there.
Wow, that's great. So that's wonderful hearing that process, and of course the ideas coming through. And one thing that you mentioned that maybe we can elaborate a little bit more on was the idea of, okay, micro learning is, like you said, taking that big lesson and then just making little chunks. But there really is a lot more to that. And one of the things that I know, learning from being in the program, in the master's program, and going through our coursework, is really understanding how cognitive overload, number one, and how micro learning can actually help, not overload oneself, and just be overwhelmed and maybe just not get as much information as needed. So can you just maybe elaborate a little bit more on that little misconception, of taking just something big and, okay, let's just go ahead and cut it into little pieces?
Well, I mean, that's one of the things. Cutting a big lesson into small pieces is not a bad idea in general. You want to take some students from the known to the unknown, from the simple to the complex. So by breaking it up into small pieces and then trying to make sure that the learners understand each piece before moving on, it's not a bad thing. But microlearning is a lot more than that. There are a lot of pedagogies that go involved with it. When talking about instructional design best practices and multimedia design, there's certain things that you need to pay attention to when you develop it. So it's not just small. That's not what defines it. As a matter of fact, the one of the editors of the book, Dr. Badrul Khan, who's been my mentor since graduate school. We're going back 25 years. Uh, he and I have been collaborating on several projects over the years, and he developed the following definition, which I'll quote. It's microlearning can be viewed as a single objective, focused, outcome-based, standalone, meaningful, and interactive learning unit delivered in bite-sized snippets. And those snippets could be in a short modular format, either digitally or non-digitally. And examples could be anything from uh, a flashcard, on one end, in the non-digital, to something that would be delivered on a computer, a tablet, or a mobile phone. So it's kind of a lot of words to say that it's a very, very small and focused bit of learning. There's a guy by the name of Berkowitz who in 2017 wrote an article called How to Create Engaging Microlearning Content. And basically what he said is that true microlearning is intentional. It's built on purpose. It's not taking something that was already made and then just chopping it up into little pieces and serving it up. It has to be designed intentionally. So I think that kind of sums up what I also believe microlearning to be. It's an intentional design, to make it so that it could be effective.
Excellent. And I think I like what Omar says here too. Omar Lopez, thank you so much for joining us. Also, Dr. Maria Elena Corbeil also joining us, and everybody else that's joining us. Feel free to drop in, drop us a hi in the chat, or if you have any questions. But Omar says here it reminds him of scaffolding, like we do with our English learners. So it could be something like that. And like you mentioned, it's something that is intentional, that has a purpose. So I think oftentimes, certain words, like for example, microlearning, you just go with that. It's like something that's bite-sized, but people or teachers or educators will take something that is already pre-made and then they just divide it up. But it's what was already originally there, but what is the purpose? And I think I loved that you emphasized that it should be something that is intentional and something that is purpose, or that is for serves a purpose, an objective. And that is something that I think is very important, and that oftentimes, even myself, I'll be honest with you, prior to understanding, concepts and instructional design, it was, let's just take this long chapter or this long lesson and divide it up. But it wasn't with a end goal of, okay, how is this going to tie together, or cutting it up this way or going in this order going to affect learning, where now it's like, okay, I need to be a little bit more intentional. And especially now working with teachers, definitely have to have a purpose and have an intention there and an objective tied to it. So I think that that's something that I really liked that you mentioned there.
Exactly. I was thinking as we were talking about one of the best examples of microlearning that I've seen is my daughter was taking a college algebra course that was offered online. The way it was taught, I'm not a big fan of, but the way the content was presented was exceptional. Basically, what they did is for each chapter of the book, let's say if they were teaching fractions, so what they did is they provided a little bit of information for the student to read, and then they showed them a short video on how to perform that operation. Okay. And then after that, they gave them some practice, scaffolded practice, where first they show you how to do the operation, solve for this problem, where they show you the whole thing step by step. Then they show you another problem that started. So they do partially, and then you have to finish it and then the next example would be of a problem where you have to solve it completely yourself. Once you go through that process, another short video that explains the next concept. And then they repeated that. So when you put those together like that, it actually made for a very, very powerful, I think, learning design that would allow students to always go back to those videos for refreshers if they wanted to remember how to do something, you know. And that's not really possible when your instructor gives you a 2.5 hour lecture with 150 slides, and you got to fast forward through it just to get to that one little piece of information that you wanted to you know to refresh your memory with.
Excellent. And I do see here, Dr. Marielena Corbeil here putting microlearning objects are also very often reusable, which makes them a very valuable tool. And I think that's something that educators now are finding out, as we have a lot of platforms that allow for either recording a lecture, recording maybe a tutorial video, or allowing a student to create something that can allow them to like a learning artifact per se, demonstrate their learning and so on. So I think that that is most definitely a tool. And she just continues here also saying, no need to reinvent the wheel. It can be a standalone or added to an existing lesson or a program. So I completely agree in having that experience, and going through the program and doing some of that micro learning, and of course also the instructional design and instructional units. Dr. Corbett, I know that we've been talking, and you gave us some examples here, possibly K through 12, and of course higher ed. But where do you see micro learning for adults? What are some examples that you may have, or you know job force? Of course, I mean, we're seeing that the future of work. I know that there's platforms like edX, Coursera. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, I think for most adults, the way they learn things these days is through their phones, through their mobile devices. You need to learn how to do something. If I wanted to know how to change a tire, I could just look up a video and go through the steps. Yesterday, we had a little picnic outside for spring break, and we set up this little tent. Setup of the tent was easy. You just popped it open, but to fold it back would require a PhD in engineering, because I spent about 45 minutes trying to do it, and then Maria Elena finally just said, "Just look up the video." So we found this video of a guy, French guy, couldn't understand a word he said, but he showed me how to do it, and with the first try, we got it. So I think a lot of the learning that we're talking about for adults is going to be in the informal area. But there are also professional development, and someone that wants to just build their skills, if they want to maybe go into a new career. Oftentimes you want to learn the things that if you want to get into a certain job, you learn those skills and you start building them. So a lot of people are starting to take advantage of programs, and sites like WebEx and Udemy to learn. Those may not necessarily fit the textbook definition of microlearning, but they are short and they are targeted, so they can be.
Yeah, and so one of the things is, I know that Google also released some certificates also for, IT, cloud design, things of that sort. So like you mentioned, for adults, maybe they're looking for a different career path. You get to go to these websites, and I believe it was on Coursera too, that you take the course, and of course, if you can take the course, for free, but I think it's if you want that certificate validated, or then of course there's a fee for that. And I'm a little familiar with that because I did a course in AR core, and so it was like the course was free and it was modular, just little bite-sized chunks and so on. But then of course at the end it's like, hey, you've completed this, but if you want this to count, or for as a certification or validated, then of course it was a small fee. I think it was like $29 for that specific. But one thing that you mentioned, it was specialized. It was just targeted for that specific area of interest. So I think that kind of, can be considered a little bit of micro learning, and in that just in time, because now, you have that just in time learning, like you mentioned, where it's, I need to figure how to do something else, pick up the phone, find a YouTube video, and then you're able to do that. And that's something that I tell teachers oftentimes, with the tools that we have, it's easy for a student to pause and play a video, but it's not really easy for a student to pause and play a live teacher at times. So, those are some of the things that I let them know, the power that we have now with our hands, with our platforms, and in our hands also as well through mobile devices. So that's something that's great. So now let's talk a little bit about, now that we've been talking about micro learning, how can one assess, micro learning? How do we assess the learning that took place and see, was this module effective? Was this bite-sized snippet intentional enough? Was it targeted enough? What are some things that we can look for, through the use of micro learning?
Well, if we look at it in the formal context, in a classroom like that example of the college algebra course, that would be very easy to assess. You can embed pre-tests and post-tests, into a learning event that consists of several micro-learning objects, or each micro-learning object can have its own little mini assessment at the end. So embedding it into a formal learning activity or assignment would be, I think, relatively easy and straightforward. Where it gets a little challenging and interesting is in the informal learning context, where, as we mentioned in that example of the YouTube video, if I wanted to learn how to change a tire, I'm not going to spend a few more minutes afterwards taking a little test to see if I understood it. I just want to learn the skill. I don't care about a grade. I want to learn the skill. According to Rene Dyer, one of our contributors in the book, if the goal of assessment is to track successful completion of a required training, the assessment might be as simple as a knowledge check or with completion tracking. It doesn't have to be anything really fancy. If the goal of the assessment is to informally share information, then maybe the assessment might be the number of likes or followers or comments or shares, that it receives. There are some, usually when I do a search for something on YouTube, I do pay attention to the number of likes and the number before I go and waste time looking at what's in the video. I look at whether or not people liked it and found it helpful. The comments are very helpful too. It helps me to hone in on the better products that are out there. If the goal is to reduce process inefficiencies, like in a company, to increase safety, then you might have to get a little bit more creative by getting other kinds of data. Like if, let's say, cybersecurity, is a really big issue these days. If you want to know if your employees are, being good digital citizens and, in the way they interact via email and social media, especially when they're on the clock and using the company's resources, I mean, you could give them a micro learning lesson every so often, and then you could do some checks to see. There's one organization I won't mention, but basically what they did, or they're doing, is they actually will send their employees some spoof emails to see how many of them fall for it. And then if a lot of them fall for it, they know that their system is not 100% foolproof. There's more work that needs to be done. So there are things that you can do for the informal as well as the formal. And according to Dyer, the micro assessments create opportunities to do something. Oftentimes we don't think about micro assessments or any type of test for that matter as an opportunity to learn something new. We always look at them as ways to check understanding. But Dyer asserts that, micro assessments should be more creative than traditional assessments. They should be more social than social, since social media is particularly well suited for delivering the microlearning. They should be able to capture engagement, satisfaction, and relevance via the number of followers and likes. They should be able to use traffic and download data to evaluate the popularity of the microlearning object, to provide immediate feedback to the learner, to yield data that's informative and usable, to inform future decisions, and to offer robust learning interventions based on the data. So if someone were to not do so well in a little micro learning assessment, it might recommend a follow-up activity or something else to help them where they're struggling, where they missed, the point.
Excellent. So those are all great points, like you said. I really liked, in that definition, talking about the social aspect of it in a micro learning assessment. I mean, I never even thought about that because I know we hear sometimes as educators, either K through 12 or in any, the connotation of assessment is it's going to be A, B, C, D and multiple choice or so on. And it's just a straightforward assessment where you either get either a digital component, a digital form that you either just bubble in, type something out, or it's going to be a piece of paper. But that social aspect is very interesting on that. Is there a way that maybe you can just elaborate a little bit more on that component? Because that's definitely something that piqued my interest right now.
Sure. Well, I mean, if you think about it, why do tests have to be scary? Why do they have to be always high stakes? If we created an environment where people could experiment and the cost of failure wasn't so bad, if you created an environment in the classroom where students could be rewarded for taking risks, and all of that could be done through a social platform. In an organization, you could set up a social platform where you set up a challenge, or instead of calling it a test, call it a challenge, and give the students or the learners the resources and say, have at it, go find it. The perfect example for me is those of you that remember the 1980s movie War Games. There was a guy who wanted to play a video game. So he basically had to learn everything there was about the person who created it to see if he could gain access, find his password to get into play the game. Unfortunately, he didn't realize that it was, at the time, they were experimenting with like artificial intelligence and war game scenarios. And the game that he thought he was playing, turned out to be a scenario that if it ever happened, would have launched World War III. But what left me so impressed about that is how much that guy was studying, doing research to try to find an answer to a question that he had a desire to learn. Why can't we make all learning like that, where instead of making it a test, make it a challenge and say, I dare you to find the answer to this. Here are the resources, have at it. I mean, if we did something like that, I think that learning would be more fun. And, if you failed, it's not like you failed the course, because we learn a lot from our mistakes too. But unfortunately, there's no reward for that learning. It's all only if you can pass the test.
Exactly, and that's very interesting that you said that. It's only if you pass the test. Now, one thing that I liked is going through your program. Uh, what I loved is that pretty much our final project was our learning portfolio. So as we went through our lessons and you assigned things, videos, things dealing with media, instructional units, all that good stuff, and all that learning, it was great that you can just take that and you gave us free reign and kind of giving us choice and saying, hey, this is your project, here is the task, and you allowed us to kind of take those risks and really get out of our comfort zone, where even as an educator, for going on 11 years in the classroom, and now 4 years now in instructional on the instructional side, it you still kind of feel like, wow, but this is the way it's always been done. Like there's like a structure. But then coming into the program, I think that was one of the things that I liked, that it was, here is the scenario, go out and figure this out. Let's solve this problem, but we're putting it in your hands. And it was that, wow, like we're taking a risk here. And it was kind of a different mindset, and that change in mindset of getting out of the comfort zone that I really appreciated, which now has helped me just, hey, let's just shoot for the moon, and then we can kind of work our way down to find a solution. But it's that risk taking is something that is great. There is a lot of learning that does happen from that, because there is some failure that happens. And one of the things that actually I was having a conversation with a friend of mine on social media, that we were talking about failure. And I know people always they may use the acronym, like, first attempt in learning. People may say, fail forward. Yesterday I was on a podcast saying, I rang the fail bell. But the learning that comes from that, is something that is amazing, and the risk taking. And I think that really does help you internalize more of what you were doing. And so I really enjoy this that you mentioned, being able to take that risk, and maybe not necessarily just say this is a test, but this is a challenge. You get a choice as to how you're going to submit that learning artifact. And I think that definitely captures my attention. Like right now, I'm like, hey, I want to take an assessment like that right now, So that definitely makes it fun there. So, Dr. Corbeil, now to kind of round out the conversation here, what do you see is the future of micro learning?
I've been thinking about it myself, and as I thought about it, I turned to some of the contributors to our book that had some really good ideas that I hadn't thought about. Hall and Hamilton are two contributors to our book, and they came up with some interesting concepts that, number one, there's going to be an emphasis, and we've already mentioned it this evening, about instead of on earning degrees, developing skills. And I think what Google is doing, and several other companies, universities better wake up to it, because it's an opportunity, it's a challenge, because they are coming into our space. And there are companies that will say, you know what, if you go and get certified, go into that program and get certified, we will hire you. You don't need to have a college degree. So for universities, I think that we need to be watchful of that, and let's be players in that game, in that area. And what if we could develop something where to compete with those companies like Google that are doing this, say, okay, we'll offer the same learning opportunities, and if you want to, you can go ahead and get the skills and just pay for the certificate. Or what if you can take that and turn it into a master's degree, and build, they're called stackable degrees, and there are universities that are looking at stackable degrees where you build competencies. What Google's doing is doing it in the informal professional learning development space. The challenge would be how to give college credit for that. And there have been universities that have experimented with it in terms of allowing college credit for MOOCs, which are the massive open online courses. But it's going to require a change of mindset. I remember when I pitched it to one of my supervisors not long ago, they said, okay, so you want to give away a course for free? Is that what I understand? What's in it for us? And I said, you give them one, they come for the other four, for the other three. And because they can apply it towards a degree, they get the best of both worlds. So I think that's one big thing that we need to be mindful of. Also, they talked about, instead of push paradigm, where learning, where content is assigned to you, it's a pull paradigm, where learners and workers seek the content that they need and want. And I thought that was a very, very good idea. And then leveraging the Internet of Things, devices like Alexa, Google Assistant, Siri, for time and place independent learning. Oftentimes, if I'm in the kitchen washing dishes, and I want to learn how to do something while I'm washing, I'll ask Alexa to play a video on this topic, and so I'm learning while I'm right there on the spot. I think that some things that are very important that they mentioned is that learning in the future will adapt to the learner instead of the other way around. Instead of the learner having to adapt to the learning, it's going to be a lot more responsive, which means we're talking about integrating AI into it, artificial intelligence. And then they talk about the idea or notion of nano learning, which is a form of microlearning that takes place in less than a minute, but it's ongoing all the time, so we're always learning. It's just concepts as they need. I think of the Matrix. Do you know how to fly a helicopter? Not yet. And then they go, okay, let's go. Imagine that kind of learning all the time. So those are some of the things that Hall and Hamilton recommended, and I can see those things. My personal opinion about microlearning and its future is that it's become the normal way that people consume content and teach themselves new things. It's already there. I mean, through our phones and mobile devices, it's already there. So it's just a matter of time before it becomes more embedded into traditional education. But I think that even this transition to online and remote learning due to the pandemic is hastening its adoption. I think it's creating opportunities. And if we're watchful where we see those opportunities, we should seize upon them and try to do something with them. So as you said, we won't go back to the status quo from a year ago.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Like you said, like definitely we don't want to just simply just okay, let's turn off the switch. Everything is good now, because episode 1 when we were there, it's kind of we were talking about like, hey, let's flip the switch, and now everybody's online, and now that maybe some sense of like normalcy comes back and schools are opening up, it's kind of like okay, let's turn off the switch and let's go back to the way things were. And I hope
Let's
that
never let that happen.
yeah, let's never let that happen. So, Dr. Corbeil, thank you so much for being here. And again, let us know, can you please, when is your book supposed to be due out?
It should come out in late April, early May. You can already pre-order it on Amazon. So it'll be out soon.
Perfect. So it is Microlearning in the Digital Age. So thank you so much. And Dr. Corbeil, I have been sharing your Twitter account here in our chat, so that way anybody that watches the video later can follow you. What other social media platforms are you active on? You can go ahead and share, and maybe also share a little bit about the master's program there at
Sure.
UTRGV.
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter at I'm Future Ready. You can find me on Facebook. I have a Facebook page for the EdTech program. And there are a bunch of others that I can't even think of right now. The program is offered fully online. It's an accelerated program, so the courses are about 7 weeks long, and you can earn your entire master's degree in as little as 10 months, taking 2 courses per module, which is perfectly manageable for working adults. 100% of our students are working adults. They've got family and work responsibilities, and yet they can comfortably handle 2 courses per 7-week module. So, and in addition to earning the master's degree, students have an opportunity of earning 1 or more graduate certificates. We've got an e-learning certificate for those who want to learn how to teach online. We've got an online instructional design certificate for those who would like to be instructional designers to help others design content for online. And we've got a technology leadership certificate that it can apply to anyone that is going to be in a leadership position that has to make decisions about technology implementations. Um, so, and we're always looking to refine and improve our program. So, as we see emerging trends, I wouldn't say that we're on the bleeding edge, because sometimes some of those bleeding edge things turn out to be fads. But we do look at them, and once we see that there's something to it, then we are always adapting and improving. For example, by redoing one of the courses so that students will learn how to create effective micro-learning objects.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Corbeil. It has been a pleasure and always an honor just to have one of my former professors, a mentor, to be here on the show, and just really excited about what you and Dr. Maria Elena and Dr. right here. I'm sorry, Dr. Badrul Khan. I have trouble pronouncing the name, but thank you so much for everything that you do and just for always being very accessible. And I did put the link into the EdTech program. So if there's anybody there, anybody that's watching or going to rewatch this, or I will put it in the show notes for the podcast as well, just in case if it piqued your curiosity, like, talking about not only the master's program, but the e-learning certificates that are offered. And of course, being a graduate of the program, it was really cool to do the 7-week modules, and then on top of that get the master's, the e-learning certificate, and the technology leadership certificate. It was just phenomenal, just all together in one package. So definitely a great program. Check them out. And if you have any questions, feel free to either reach out to me. You can definitely reach out to Dr. Corbeil, as he said, at I Am Future Ready on Twitter, and they'll gladly answer any of your questions. Or you can contact them through the utrgv.edu/edtech page, and they'll be more than happy to get back to you. And again, Dr. Corbeil, you were our first guest on our very first show back in April 10th when this whole thing started. And now you're back here for show number 53. I never thought that I'd be going on this long. And again, it's always an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And our audience members, thank you, Omar. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Dr. Dr. Maria Elena Corbeil also as well, that was here, and all our viewers and anybody that's going to rewatch the show. Thank you so much. Just wanted to let you know, I am taking a little break, 2 weeks off. We're going to come back strong in April. I just, needed some time to recharge the batteries and all that good stuff. But we are ready and set to go for April. If you'd like to be a guest on our show, just go to our webpage at myedtech.life, and go to the contact me or contact us, and go ahead and just submit your name and let us know what it is that you'd like to talk about. I'll gladly get back to you and we can schedule a show. I mean, it's a great platform to share your passion, share your inspiration, and share the wonderful things that you're working on. Just like Dr. Corbeil was here sharing on his passion for microlearning, the edtech world, and all the great things that they are doing in the program. So again, we will see you guys April 3rd. All right. So thank you guys so much for joining us. And as always, until next time, stay techie, my friends.